Hello and welcome back to the Hardwood Hoops podcast. This is episode 33, and this is our NBA draft fan draft episode. So the plan is we've got the top 5 teams, a representative from each of them, a fan slash draft expert. They're all going to make their picks for their teams and talk about the prospects they were considering and why. And then we'll see what the top 5 shakes out like. So first of all, picking number 1 for the Minnesota Timberwolves, we have a former guest. Joe Holbert is back on the show. How you doing, Joe?
Yeah, I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Just excited for next week now. This draft's been a long time coming with the amount of time we've had to review all these prospects.
100%. It's weird as well because obviously, as a guy who likes to watch film, there was no NCAA tournament. So,
yeah,
I've kind of, because I think a lot of teams use the tournament as how they react to competitive play, obviously, but there wasn't any of that. So you've kind of got gaps, and people who are top of people's boards now may not have been after the NCAA tournament. You've seen over the years people have risen. Jarrett Culver last year was not people's top 5, but after he took Texas Tech to the final, he was. So it's a very weird draft to cover.
Yeah, every year that's what I said to my friends. That every year there's always one big riser, isn't there? A player that takes a team that maybe shouldn't be there, and they take them all the way to the semi-finals or the final 4 or Elite 8. But this year, without that competitive basketball, a lot of these prospects have hardly played in almost 9 months, I guess.
Yeah, I think as well, college teams, they take a while to figure it out because it's obviously different guys every year. So that can certainly, with some of the guys we're going to talk about, that definitely can impact their stock.
Definitely, and consensus top picks wise, you've got someone like Wiseman who had that suspension and only played, I think it was 3 games. You've got LaMelo Ball with the injury who hasn't played a competitive game for nearly a year, I think it is. So there's loads of different connotations for this draft, which makes it the weirdest one probably for a while. So if we move on to talk about Timberwolves first. So number 1 pick, I've asked everyone else the same question throughout my draft interviews. Would you want to trade that pick at all? Or are you quite married for them to pick at number 1 and kind of go with who's best and not risk it and move that pick for a veteran or to trade back?
I wouldn't mind trading down a couple of spots. But I think in terms of trading the 1 pick straight for a player, I don't think there's anyone realistically available. I mean, the list of guys I would think of without, going into like LeBron and Curry, which is unrealistic. Guys who would potentially be on the move within the next 2 years are guys like Beal and Booker. I don't think the timing's quite right for that. The Wizards probably actually aren't that far off the 8 seed. They were in the bubble after all, and the Suns went unbeaten in Disneyland. So those are kind of the 2 guys I look at. We've been linked with guys like Aaron Gordon, but Aaron Gordon is not good enough to trade the number 1 pick for. So, there are talks. The Hornets want to move up for James Wiseman, and I think the Timberwolves have done a very good job leaking stuff that basically makes other teams think that there's going to be a lot of trade ups. So they've done a very good job on that end, and I'd be interested in someone like PJ Washington to move down to the 3rd spot. I think he fits what the Timberwolves are trying to build, which is having D'Angelo, Russell, and Cat, and then you've got 3 sort of wings alongside them. He'd fit that, and then obviously you could take whoever's left. If we traded to 3, it would be one of Edwards or Ball, you would think, because it seems the Hornets are enamored with James Wiseman. So, yeah, it would have to be the right player for me to trade the pick, and I think it's kind of bad timing.
Yeah, would you trade back as far as 7 or 8 with the Pistons or the Knicks, or you don't think they could offer enough to even warrant you going back to those sort of tier of players that you're going to get at 7 and 8?
They'd have to offer a pretty enticing young player for me. If I was looking at the Pistons, I would be looking for Luke Kennard. And again, is that enough of a sweetener to move down 7 spots? I'm especially in a weak class. I'm not so sure myself, unless they were going to do a sort of Eurostash, like I cannot pronounce his name, and I'm really good with names, but Pokusevsky. I've slaughtered that. I apologise. If we were to stash someone like that, I'd be cool with it. But I also don't think, for what we've tried to do, I don't think that's what the front office want. I think they want to win now. So, yeah, I would need something sweetened, which is why I think Chicago or Charlotte is more realistic because you're only moving down to 3 or 4, and you could theoretically still probably get who's top of your board.
Cool. Yeah, I would agree. I don't think there's enough back there in terms of the gap between the prospects to warrant trading down 6, 7, 8 spaces. And there's a lot of talk about players like Drew Holiday and Aaron Gordon, and I think you're right. I think you don't often get a team like the Timberwolves with the stars you've got picking at number 1. So I don't think you should then trade out for someone who's not really a star just to kind of get a veteran. So I agree with you. In terms of player options, then at number 1, there's kind of a consensus top 3, but I know that's not your consensus. In terms of tiers, who do you have as your top prospects for number 1?
So I have got LaMelo Ball at number 1. I have done for quite a long time. He's one of the I've probably would say I've watched 6 players in depth to the point where I would consider myself well knowledge, good knowledge on them. He's one of them. I think lead guards are obviously what you want in the draft, but he's got a lot of really interesting tools and he's unique. And I think the key with him, he's an outstanding playmaker, but if you can get him to be a top tier scorer, that passing becomes even more deadly because you see it with Luka Doncic. I mean, you're a Mavs fan. You see it that with Luka, you can kind of push him away from the basket, and you might think, right, no one's making that pass, but actually he can. And I think Ball's passing is as close to elite as you're going to see from a guard prospect. So he's my number 1. I've got Edwards at 2. I think Edwards has the highest ceiling, but I don't know if he'll get there because I think a lot of what's going to, I mean, this is true of any draft prospect, but he's going to be reliant on a good situation because he's got some habits that need to be ironed out. My biggest worry with guys like him, I sort of Andrew Wiggins, among other players, you sort of OJ Mayo back in the day, that these sort of alphas, if you give them too much of a scoring role day 1, they can develop bad habits. John Wall also, I know John Wall has had a great career, but there are some who believe that because the Wizards were so bad in his first couple of years, he did pick up some bad habits. So I think, but with Edwards, if a team can really work with him, he can be a number 1 option. And in this draft class, which is very weak, it's probably the weakest draft class since I would say 2013, which was the Anthony Bennett, Victor Oladipo, KCP draft class. I would say this is the weakest since then. But if you're going to find a number 1 option in a class this week, you go for it. And my third guy, it's not James Wiseman. I think Wiseman's got a lot of flaws. A lot of the draft analysts I speak to regularly also believe he's got these flaws. The thing with, like, I think people over focus on athleticism. So yes, he does have great measurables, but that doesn't even make you a good defender, let alone a good player. Because you look at someone like Willie Cauley-Stein, he's got outstanding measurables, but he has never amounted to anything other than a slightly below average NBA center. But if you actually watch the defensive tape of Wiseman, albeit he's young, it's not very pretty to watch. So I have got Devin Vassell at 3. I like those prospects. I think that the key with him is he going to be a guy that can be a secondary playmaker? He's never going to be a number 1 option, and you don't need to be a number 1 option to be valuable in the NBA. But it's whether how much can we believe in the sort of the pick and roll possessions, just that playing off ball. What can he do on offense? But as a wing, he's got range, and he's come from a very good college program in Florida State. So he's my number 3, but it's not a very strong class. Someone I speak to, I asked him, it was a couple of months ago, about a prospect. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Obi Toppin. And I said, what's a good outcome for Obi Toppin? I don't know if you remember a guy called Jordan Hill who played for the Lakers. But he said if Obi Toppin becomes Jordan Hill, that's a good outcome, which probably summarizes this draft class.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of Vassell as well, he's a little bit lower on consensus board. So I guess you did trade back to out of the top 3, which we probably lose LaMelo and Edwards if you're out of the top 3. That he would kind of be the realistic option at 4-5. And I'm obviously not a Timberwolves fan, but outside looking in, getting a wing player would suit the team. But again, if you're number 1, I don't think you're going to pick a player like Vassell and take that risk there at number 1. No,
I said this to someone yesterday. a great draft analyst I followed, Ben Pfeiffer. He put out a mock draft of what he would do, and he had Vassell at 1, and I kind of messed him. I'm like, look, I don't. It sounds weird when you say it out loud, but I wouldn't take Vassell at 1. But if he was our top pick, I wouldn't complain. I'd be quite happy, because the thing with a guy like Edwards, there's a lot that can go wrong. I think with Vassell, I don't think there's a lot that can go wrong. I just think he's going to be one of those players. You saw it with Brandon Clark last year, for example, that just kind of turns up and he's good. It is that simple for some prospects.
Like a higher floor, a lower ceiling, I guess, sort of player in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, Minnesota doesn't need a number 1 option. They've got, depending on how good people think D'Lo is, I kind of sit in the middle. He's not a superstar, but he's also not rubbish, like some would have you believe. But he can run an offense. He's a good playmaker. He knows how to use his gravity, and he knows his limitations and plays within them. And then we got Cat. We don't really need someone to take over, which bodes well for someone like Edwards. But Vassell will be the kind of player that you just see on playoff teams. I think with Denver, you saw how their depth on the wings really helped them sort of push to the conference finals. And I think you could argue, there are some arguing, that this is actually the most important position in the league right now, because if you can stash your wings with rangy players with wingspan and range, there's a lot you can do from a lineup perspective.
Yeah, especially with added shooting as well, which someone like Vassell can do to a point. I know he's only young, but he's got the sort of shot selection, and he's very good at corner threes as well. So I think he adds that as well. But so in terms of the first pick, then with the number 1 pick, who are you going to pick for the Timberwolves if they don't trade out?
So I would take Anthony Edwards. So I think I've seen this Timberwolves organization be bad for a very long time. We had 1 playoff appearance. And, I feel sorry for sort of Kings fans, but our playoff appearance was miserable because Jimmy Butler got injured when we were the 3 seeds. And we weren't just the 3 seed. We were the 3rd best team in the league. We beat, a game I'll always remember is we blew out the LeBron Cavs. We were up by like 30 at halftime, and that was a really good team. But we need to take a punt. We really do. And I think with Edwards, he's worth it if we're going to stay, because the potential for him to be a high-end number 2 or a low-end number 1 is real. His physical profile is insane. The way I can describe him is if he was on a sports game, he would have the top sort of agility and balance. He just blows past people, and that obviously helps you. But the difference is he going to be an Andrew Wiggins or a Shabazz Muhammad, or is he going to be a sort of John Wall type guy who actually uses that athleticism but combines it with good decision making? Because the mistake a lot of athletic players have is they actually are too reliant on it, so they don't develop counters. But I think he lands in a good situation because he doesn't need to run the offense. And with David Vanterpool, who is our associate head coach, he's very good with player development. He did good work with CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard in Portland. So I just think he would be landing in a good situation. And I think the upside you've got to bank on. The issue I've seen with him at times is he overestimates his athleticism. So I've seen clips where there'll be a really tight driving lane, and instead of kicking it out, he will kind of, I don't know, he'll chuck up a bad shot, or he'll just try and go to the rim, and he'll end up taking a deep floater, which is not what you want to do out of rhythm. You really want to be taking a floater. If the defender's in drop coverage and you've got a defender behind you, you don't want to put a floater over a 5-man wall around the paint. So there's a lot to do, but I think in this draft class, I think you can take the risk. He would not have gone 1 last year, though.
No, do you think the comparisons between him and Wiggins is just because you guys have got the number 1 pick, and the fact that Edwards shows a little bit of, I don't know, he's got a good motor, but it's not a consistent motor, is it? Sometimes on the defensive end, he gives a little bit of inconsistent effort. And sometimes, like you said, he takes bad shots. Do you think that's where the comparison comes in, or you just think it's the fact that he's got that athleticism and that it's you guys that have got the number 1 pick?
I think it's a lazy-ish comparison, to be honest. I do think it's because we've got the 1 pick. The issue with Wiggins is, and I don't see this as an issue with Edwards, is Wiggins's handle and his dribbling has never been NBA level. He really struggles to change direction. The only, because he's athletic, he can score. I think he's always had good rim finishing numbers for us, but it wasn't consistent enough, and that's probably why it's not probably why, that is why his scoring fluctuated on a night-to-night basis. I think Edwards has more burst than Wiggins did, and I think he's got a better handle to go with it. I don't really have a comparison for Edwards, just because I think he's very unique, and his situation at Georgia was quite unique. But I think the key with him is going to be, is he going to buy into a system, or is he going to be one of those players where the system has to be built around him? And that is the downside of wings like him. Whereas if you talk about someone like Devin Vassell, he doesn't want a system built around him. And the way he plays, he won't be wanting those isolation touches, so you can fit him into your existing system. That is the key hypothetical for Edwards. But I would take the risk because I think he's going into the good situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the players you've got, and like you said, the coaching staff you've got, and the way you play, you won't have to be the number one option, which is key for a player that's already got a history of taking bad shots. But like you said, you've got a kind of tier one in him and LaMelo. I just wanted to touch on why not LaMelo rather than why Edwards. Is it because of the fit with D'Lo and the defensive numbers would just be too scary, you think?
I think a lot of what LaMelo is very good at is actually, I'm not going to say it's similar to what D'Lo's good at, but I think he would be wasted next to D'Lo. Now, here's the thing. There is always a debate about drafting for fit, but the reality is this franchise, they tried to max D'Angelo Russell last summer, and they gave up an awful lot to get him. They believe in him for at least the next 3 or 4 years, and I just think it would be kind of a waste for both LaMelo and the franchise to have a player who isn't the best fit alongside him. We are in win now mode. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't take a project player. Every player in this draft, apart from when you get to guys like Desmond Bain at the end of the first round, every player at the top of this draft is a project. They're big projects. But I think Edwards is a nicer fit alongside Cat and Russell because you can play him on the wing. And I think he can still be valuable not running the offense. Whereas Ball, some of the guys I speak to, I'm sure you've watched tape of Jason Williams or White Chocolate. That is the comparison that I've kind of spoken about with guys about LaMelo Ball. So a player like Jason Williams, he was incredibly fun to watch, but he was actually a hard fit alongside other backcourt players. And I think with Ball, you want to actually make him probably a more effective version of Jason Williams. I just don't think it's the right situation. But if I was mocking for Charlotte or Chicago, I would take him at 1 and I wouldn't think twice because I think he can run an offense, but he wouldn't get to do that in Minnesota because this is D'Angelo Russell's offense.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that is the most likely pick. We've also heard that he's killed his draft workouts. I'm not sure about some of his work on the board. There's a lot of rumours that he needs to kind of mature a little bit as a person, but apparently Edwards' physical draft workouts have been very good. Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you, are there any other prospects that you think might go in the top 5, 6? Maybe one more prospect that you want to touch on just to talk about whilst we're here? I know we've already spoke about Wiseman and Vassell. Is there anyone else that you're confident on giving us a little review on?
I like Kira Lewis from Alabama. I don't think he will go top 5, but I would take him in the top 5. I think, first of all, I try not to be obvious with prospects, but he's rapid. He's first
so quick.
If he was on 2K, he'd have the quick first step Hall of Fame badge.
It's like a fox pace, isn't it, almost?
Yeah, it's crazy. And I will always buy into guys who have that speed because it's the same in every sport. It's the same in football. It's the same in the NFL. Speed kills. And in this draft class, if I was picking sort of between 5 and 10, I would take a chance on an attribute in this draft class. So I think he can clearly shoot as well. I think theoretically he looks like a lead guard, and I don't understand why he's so low on some people's boards. The assist to turnover ratio isn't great, but the thing people don't understand sometimes is that college teams stretch bigs are in kind of low demand, I think, especially for a team like Alabama, who they're not just going to go, oh, you can shoot. They want 4 and 5 star prospects. So you kind of get what you're given at the college level. You can't go really looking for specific guys half the time. And obviously the good college programs do a better job. But what I'm kind of getting at is that Lewis's assist turnover ratio for me was because of his personnel that he played alongside. That would be my take on it. And I think I wouldn't look at assist to turnover to knock him, because I think you've got to look at the passes he has made and the assists he has got, and they clearly show that he can be a lead guard. So I would be looking at him. If I was Detroit or New York, I would run that pick in.
Yeah, he's a very good off-ball defender as well. I think we've got him at 9 on our board. So, like you said, we're quite high on him as well. And I think if you're a New York Knicks, he's a much safer pick, just banking on someone who's elite at one thing rather than maybe go like a Maxey or I don't know. There's rumours that they'll go with Maxey or Killian Hayes, but I think that Lewis could maybe be just as good as those guys.
Yeah, I think Lewis has a high ceiling. If he can develop into an off the dribble shooter, he could probably become the best player in his class. It's just a big if at the moment, but he can hit from spot up, which is obviously key. If you're a lead guard, you have to be able to shoot pull-ups off the dribble, because otherwise, people aren't going to respect you. That's the problem De'Aaron Fox is running into. He's not a consistent off the dribble shooter, so teams kind of play really far under on him, and he's ineffective at times.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for making the pick with us, Joe. You're going to be back on in just over a week or so to talk about some free agents, so that'd be good to have you on again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm now going to pass on to my conversation with Mark Cadman, who's going to make our pick number 2 for Golden State Warriors. We're now joined by Mark Cadman from the Golden State Warriors UK fan page. How are you doing, Mark? You all right?
Yeah, very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Very excited for the draft. We're just saying off air that we're only 7 days away, and it's going to be a 4-hour midnight till 4 a.m. event. But I'm still excited for it.
Oh yeah, I'll be staying up for it. I think I usually stay up anyway, but especially considering we got such a high pick, I'll certainly be up for the first hour at least.
Yeah, this will be the first year in a while that you've had a reason to stay up, I think.
Yeah, I think last year it was like Zion Mania. That's why I was kind of
true.
I wanted to see all the fuss, but yeah, we often last few years we've been going towards the end of the first round. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to next Wednesday.
Yeah. So in terms of our mock draft, Anthony Edwards has gone number 1. Joe picked him on behalf of the Timberwolves. So now we're on to Golden State with pick 2. Let's start talking about the options for the pick in general at first. So you're on the same page as me, or you were, that there should be some trade talks regarding this pick. Ideally, do you think they should trade out, trade back? And what do you think they will do rather than what you think you'd want them to do?
So trying to guess what I think they're going to do is just... I've given up trying. There's been so many different reports from supposed insiders over the last couple of weeks. I made a list earlier. I think we've been closely linked, or we are definitely going to take 6 or 7 different players at number 2. And then I saw a report just before we started this recording that we're definitely trading down. So I to be honest, I have no idea what we will do. I think we're going to end up keeping number 2, and I'm fairly confident that my pick is who we're going to go with in the end. But yeah, it's. I said to you off air, like, I'm kind of flip flopping what I think we should do. I think yesterday I was convinced we should trade down, try and kind of get some more for our pick. I think there are some teams that are a bit more desperate below us in the lottery, but right now I'm thinking let's just go for the pick at number 2, and hopefully we get a generational talent who's going to kind of set us up to continue the dynasty for the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the hope for a team like this, isn't it? You can get someone that can contribute now, but can also be there when some of the stars have gone. I don't know how long someone like a Draymond will be around. He's probably the prime candidate to move on in the next 2 or 3 seasons. So yeah, getting someone to help that continue that, like you said, would be ideal. It depends on the options for me. I think there's good options to trade for a veteran, but without knowing what the trade would be, it's hard to decide whether that would be better than keeping the second pick, because the amount of rumours, like you said, with the Warriors is just crazy at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the most like compelling trade for a vet that I've heard was there's talk of New Orleans, the Pelicans, like shipping Drew Holiday around.
Yeah.
And at first, when I heard that, I was like, "Oh, I think we should go all out to get Drew Holiday. He's, I think, one of the top 30, top 40 players in the league. You add him on to the rest of the team, like the rest of our roster. I think he could really make a difference, and certainly in the playoffs, like big minutes, he's comfortable there. As it's gone on,
he's a good defender as well, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But I think I was listening. It was on the Zach Lowe podcast where they were talking about that trade and all the kind of permutations to it. And do you know what? I wasn't convinced. I was really bullish on it at first, and I think as time's gone on, I'm like, no. I think if Drew Holiday is the only option out there, the only feasible option, I'm not sure I would want to cash in the second pick, because who knows? I'm hoping it's going to be a long time before we have a pick this high in the draft again. So.
Yeah, true. One rumor I saw today that I wanted to ask you about. So there was a rumor going around the Knicks might offer you the 8th pick and Mitchell Robinson, who's their star defensive center, in exchange just for the number 2. I don't know if you have to chuck in a second round in the future as well, but the rumor was just number 2. Would that be a trade that would interest you, because you can still pick at 8 and you get that center that will help let Draymond play more at the 4? Or you think that's nowhere near enough and you'd rather just pick someone at 2 or trade up for a veteran?
That is interesting. I hadn't seen that. Do you know what? I'm tempted. I think I really like Mitchell Robinson. He's very athletic. I think he's one of the few things to shout about on the Knicks at the moment.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I mean, he's a great shot blocker as well. Would him, Kevon Looney, and Marquise Chris be enough at the centre position? I don't know, but like you said, we would still, if we still had the 8th pick, I think my kind of top 2 choices, I think one of them could potentially still be available at number 8. So I am definitely tempted, but yeah.
Then that'd be a sort of draft night trade, I think, if anything happens with the Knicks. I think they'll just decide to go all out on the night, on the Wednesday. So let's talk about a couple of prospects then. If you were picking at number 1, would Anthony Edwards come into your consideration? I know he's gone off our board now, but or do you think he doesn't quite fit the mold with Steph and Clay already there?
So I think I've definitely been reading up a lot on him, and it's something I've been a bit hot and cold on. It depends like which kind of draft board you read, and some people have him down. He's obviously very athletic. He's a ball handler, which isn't a bad thing. I think to have some other playmakers in the team. I think we saw last year, well, certainly in like the 2019 finals when KD was out, Steph was kind of really like with a box and one defense. Like I think he was really quite pressured. So having more ball handlers in the team, especially we've lost Iggy, we've lost Sean Livingston, isn't a bad thing. I don't know whether Anthony Edwards is going to be a bust, though. I think that's probably a bit harsh, but there's a lot of one of the reports I did see yesterday was the Warriors had a kind of draft interview with him, and they were immediately put off and didn't think he either had the right mentality or would be the right fit for the team. So I don't know. I think he could be a really good player, and I think he is a good pick for the Timberwolves. They certainly don't need a big with Karl Anthony Towns there. So
No,
I don't know. If we had number one, I would have definitely considered it, but I don't think I would have gone for him.
Okay, cool. Now let's talk about the number two pick. Let's start with the player that you think you're not going to select, but you think might be around at 8 if you were lucky. What player was that? Or who's your second choice in consideration?
So I think that is Denny Avdija. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
pronouncing that correctly, but he seems to have really, in the last couple of weeks, been jumping up the board.
Mhm.
He was one of the first rumors I saw where it's like the Warriors are definitely sold on him at number 2. They were blown away by his pre-draft workout. And obviously he's got, I think with a lot of like the European players, we've seen it with Luka, obviously, because they have experience of playing in a men's league before joining the NBA. I think they do often come in with a higher basketball IQ. They're much more likely to slot in and kind of hit the ground running, so to speak, than some of the kind of USA based players. But yeah, so I'm hoping if that trade is made with the Knicks and we do have the 8th pick, I'm hoping that he is available at the 8 because I certainly think again wings is somewhere where we have a lot less firepower than we did a couple of years ago, and I think having just extra assets on the wings can certainly take some of the pressure away from Stephen Clay. That being said, I'm not entirely sold on his kind of perimeter shooting. I think his free throw percentage is pretty poor as well.
Yeah.
And that's usually a good indication. If someone's not a very good free throw shooter, it's unlikely they're going to kind of improve their 3-point shot as their career progresses. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, he was number 4 on my draft board and on a lot of draft boards. He's 4, 5, 6. He's really close to the top 3. I think if Detroit, New York, or even the Cavs did want to trade with you and they offered you something you couldn't refuse, I think if he's still there at 5, 6, 7, 8, and you had one of those picks, I think he'd be a perfect fit. There's no better team to teach someone to shoot than Golden State, and to teach someone to defend a little bit better as well with Draymond, and I've forgotten his name now, but one of your assistant coaches is known for being a bit of a defensive guru, so I think he could help Denny. But I do agree, I don't think he's quite ready to be the number 2 pick. So let's go on to talk about who you're taking then. So number 2, who are you going to select for number 2 for the Golden State Warriors?
It's got to be James Wiseman. Got to be.
My favourite player in the draft as well.
Really?
Yeah, I love James Wiseman. Yeah, I understand the worries with the whole suspension that he only played 3 college games, but this is a draft where there's not loads of surefire things, that we've had in the past where we knew who was going to go 1, 2, 3, etc. And I just think he fits really well. I wouldn't take him at 1 if I was Minnesota because of the fit. I agree with you; it doesn't fit with Karl Anthony Towns. But if I was Golden State, then I think he's a perfect fit. How do you see him fit into the team then? Is that going to be the starting center to help guard Anthony Davis in a Western Conference Finals?
Yeah, so I think he goes straight into the starting lineup, and that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of sold on him. I mentioned, I think Marquise Chris was a revelation last year. I was not very confident when we picked him up. Given his kind of recent career history, I didn't think he was. I thought he was going to be a liability defensively, but he was one of the few highlights last year. Just seeing his energy and his kind of hustle as well. I'm also probably the biggest Kevon Looney fan, certainly this side of the Atlantic. He is one of my favourite players, and I'm just really, really hoping that he can stay fit and really have a good run next year. But I think James Wiseman would kind of go straight into the starting lineup with those three bigs in the team. I'd be quite confident. Probably the most confident I've been in our bigs for probably 4 or 5 years, to be honest. Yeah, so I think there's always a risk with bigs in the draft. It takes bigs a bit longer to settle. I think it's a really difficult position for a rookie to go in and really make an impact. You look at DeAndre Ayton at Phoenix. I think he had a bit of a rocky first year and was kind of called a bit of a liability at times. But I think if you took, like, certainly in the bubble, I thought he looked so
much better, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I think so I think Wiseman will go straight into the starting lineup. I also think what I'm hoping is that over the next couple of years he will kind of grow into being an all-star, a perennial all-star, and will be the next foundational piece for the Warriors. But we'll see.
Yeah, if I was a Warriors fan, I would hope so too. And I think that Eric Pascal as well, I like as a forward.
Love
So
it.
I think that I know you're probably not going to play him at centre a lot of the time, especially with Draymond. But if there's injuries and stuff, you've got Draymond and him who can kind of slide up to the 5 in small ball, and Pascal can kind of learn off Draymond as well. So potentially in 3 years' time, if Draymond Green's not there or if he's in his last year, you could have Pascal and Wiseman as your future in your front court, which isn't a bad front court, I don't think, for the future either, which is good.
No, I completely agree. I'm. Do you know what? I'm even more excited for next Wednesday now after this conversation. I'm convinced we're going to go all the way. I said off air that I was trying to be a bit modest about the Warriors' chances next year, but this has just got me hyped up.
You've got to use that trade exception and the mid-level to find a wing from somewhere, haven't you? That's the only problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe Lacob is so wealthy. If he doesn't use the luxury tax this year, he's going to get pelters from the Warriors fans. So I'm hoping. I trust they'll do the right thing.
Yeah, and Wiggins still could be a good player, and if not, it's a hell of a lot of money where you can trade him for someone else. But we'll have to see. Cool. All right, thank you very much for coming on and making the pick. I hope that they do take Wiseman and he ends up being an all-star for you.
That's very kind. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just going to pass now on to my conversation with James Plowright, who is picking number 3 for the Hornets. We are now joined by James Plowright, who is a draft analyst and Hornets fan. He is making the pick at number 3 for the Charlotte Hornets. How are you doing, James?
I'm really good, Liam. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Can't wait for next week. Interested to see your thoughts on who you might pick at number 3. Are you excited to have such an early pick in the draft?
I mean, 2020 has been a pretty terrible year, but the Hornets moving up in the lottery was, I was like in ecstasy high mode for like a week afterwards, like watching every video, listening to every podcast, because I just couldn't quite believe it had actually happened, especially I think, most of the time in the lottery, the Hornets get screwed. So, the most famous time is, I think it's, 2012, and Anthony Davis, we're number 1, we're all in line, got bumped down to number 2 and took MKG. So to actually move up, it's the first time we moved up in our modern history. Was absolutely thrilling, and I'm pretty happy with the spot we landed in at 3, to be honest.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a longer wait as well. We were talking off air about how much planning and preparation teams can do. So I'm hoping that your Hornets team might get it right. So in terms of picks so far, Joe, who picked for the Timberwolves, he picked Anthony Edwards, and Mark, who picked for the Golden State Warriors, he picked Wiseman. So we're on to pick number 3. What are you thinking in general? Do you think there's any chance for move up or move down here for you guys, or you think that you're going to kind of stick at 3 and take who's available?
I think if I had to bet on something, I'd say that we stick at 3. Every year there are rumors. This year there's been loads of rumors, loads of smoke that the Hornets could move up to 1 or 2, giving up, number 32, Miles Bridges. I think fans of opposition teams have even thrown in PJ Washington, which the Hornets would never do that to move up 1 or 2 spots in this draft particularly. So I think anything could happen. I think we could move up. I think it's less likely to move down just because we've kind of got a lot of interesting young pieces, and what this team really needs, that everyone knows, is that center guy to build around. And look, there would have been better years to get the 3rd pick to try and get that guy, but the guys at the top of this draft have got that upside. If they were to reach some of their potential, and the Hornets player development program over the last 2 years has really done a good job at making strides for a lot of young players who we've drafted or they've inherited from the previous coaching regime. So I think staying put is the most likely case. I don't think they're going to mortgage the future. The Hornets haven't traded one of their first round picks to anyone, I don't think since like the Ben Gordon trade back in
a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. So Hornets, for good reason, they don't part with their picks easily, their future picks, because track record says they're going to come in useful at some point. So yeah, but if anything, I would say trade up if they really feel sold on kind of, the rumors have been maybe Wiseman they've been heavily linked with, that they might potentially want to move up for him.
Yeah, that's the rumor I was going to ask you about, that Wiseman at 2. Timberwolves seems to be more locked in at 1. I don't think people are going to trade with them as much, but there seems to be a rumor that the Hornets might trade up just one spot, similar to what the Celtics and 76ers did a few years ago. Do you think that's likely, and would it take just a 32nd pick, or you think Golden State might want even more to trade up just one spot?
They definitely want more, I think, especially a franchise who they would probably view as quite desperate in Charlotte to get the guy. I mean, it's been so public, the interest in Wiseman, the classic, and I know Hornets fans aren't that thrilled with it really, but I know a lot of people thinking, is this all a little bit of smoke? That Charlotte actually want one of Edwards' a ball to fall to them, and they're just throwing this out there to try and, muddy the water for the other teams. But, it obviously makes sense from a fit point of view. Like, the Hornets need a center. James Wiseman is a center. He's got upside. He's, theoretically would be a good defender at the next level, and that's what this team really needs. But I think Mitch Kupchak, GM, has been really clear from last year to this year, saying that we need talent across the roster. Like, we are not at the position where we are worrying about fit right now. So I know when you're making a mock draft, you always think of, oh, well, how would this person fit here? But honestly, I think the team will be looking at this draft as, let's just add the best player available, irrelevant of position.
And just say you had the number 1 pick in this scenario, and the 2 players hadn't gone, who would you have been wanting to pick as your ultimate pick in this draft? Would it be who's still left at 3, or do Edwards or Wiseman kind of hit the top of your board in terms of draft board and draft ranking?
So I've got Edwards first on my board. I've got Wiseman third. I won't spoil who's second just yet because that's who I'm going to pick. But if I'm being honest, I view the top 4 in this draft almost in a very, very close tier. So you've got like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. And the 4th player I'd add to that list is Killian Hayes, the kind of American/French point guard who's played in Germany last year, who I'm really high on. I know like some places like Kevin O'Connor at the Ring has got him number 1 overall. I'm not quite that high, but I do think he's the same caliber of prospect as Edwards, Ball, and Wiseman. And I think they're all really close. They've all got warts. None of them are no-brainer picks. And that's why I think the 3rd pick is so good for Charlotte, because you can kind of wait at the bottom of that. You've got kind of whoever you pick is going to be on a much lower kind of rookie scale contract compared to that 1st and 2nd pick, where the incremental increases are quite large. And the Hornets got quite a lot of cap space for the next couple of years. But I think you wait there and you see who's left. Of those kind of the obvious 3, the national 3, Edwards, Ball, and Wiseman seem to be consensus. You pick whichever one of those is left, and no one kind of really criticizes you too much, because for a lot of people, those 3 have separated themselves from the pack. I'd throw Hayes in there myself as well, but I don't think the Hornets are going to be considering Hayes, especially with the glut of guards they've got. But just even though, because I don't think NBA circles seem to be on high on Hayes as I seem to be.
No, I agree. I think a lot of European scouts, and like you said, Kevin O'Connor, and then I can't remember his name now, but there's a guy as well from The Athletic who's quite high on Killian Hayes. Whereas when you hear all the draft rumours, it seems to be a top 4 of the 3 you spoke about, the main 3, and then Halliburton up there as well. And Killian Hayes seems to kind of fall by the wayside a little bit, but I'm with you. I think he's one of the better prospects in the draft. If you look at the upside, I think Hayes is definitely one of the better options. So in terms of your pick then, let's spend a bit of time talking about who you're going to pick, and then we'll go on to why and maybe talk about some positives and negatives. So with the 3rd pick, who are the Hornets going to take for you?
So with the 3rd pick in the draft, I'm going to select LaMelo Ball,
Cool.
who obviously a point guard or guard/wing. No one really knows. Played in Australia this past year for Illawarra Hawks. 17 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists per game. Won rookie of the year there. Obviously, I don't think I need to go. Anyone who's following the draft will have kind of Googled LaMelo Ball. He's got like more Instagram, Twitter followers than like a load of NBA All-Stars. So he's well known amongst basketball fans, being part of the Ball family. But Yeah, that would be my pick. Pure upside. Who cares? We've already got 2 point guards on the roster, and Rozier and Graham. Like at the minute, I'm not taking a guard or a playmaker because I've got those guys on the roster. They're not the future to a championship team in Charlotte. They are just the guys who are currently playing for the team. I like him, Graham especially, but not to the point that I would ever turn down a talent like LaMelo. At the same time, he would scare the crap out of me drafting him, just because he's not taken that traditional route. He's not got a lot of the check marks that you can compare a lot of the top prospects. He's not been to a lot of the camps, not played at the same level. So there's some concern there.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's kind of the most boom or bust prospect, especially on an American. I know there's a lot of Europeans that people see as that sort of boom or bust with the level of competition, but LaMelo Ball is kind of the ultimate one. In terms of how you play, in terms of style and scheme of fit, does LaMelo Ball fit your offense, or do you think they'll have to change that to kind of fit the way that he plays? Because I know that he's a very ball dominant guard.
Yeah. The Hornets, they don't have any single star at the moment, so they haven't been going through that one guy. So obviously when Kemba was here and Borrego was the coach, he was here for kind of 1 year of Kemba. I think in 2013-14, Kemba had the most touches per game of any NBA player in history, which is a heck of a stat. That's not been the case since Borrego's been here. He's tried to share the ball a little bit more. One thing he's really looked at with Rozier and Graham is getting the ball out of their hands, getting them off ball, running off screens, running off movement. But the team will always say we want everyone to touch the ball, we want everyone to pass. Like if they had LeBron James, they wouldn't be doing that. They'd put the ball in LeBron James's hands. So I think with LaMelo, I do think they would try and put him in position to succeed. One interesting thing, I was just having this discussion the other day, if we did draft LaMelo, I don't even think he'd start, which would be interesting because I think Rozier and Graham did so well last year. I think the coaching staff and organization would probably feel they owe it to them to start them and kind of try and make LaMelo earn that. And also with him kind of playing on that second unit, at least early on in his career, it could be a bit of a LaMelo show with the second unit. He would have the ball more, kind of creating for others who struggle to create as much. That could actually be a better fit early on than him trying to fit into a starting five with some more options. Now, long term, don't get me wrong, I think halfway through the year, or as long as he does well, he would be starting, no doubt. You're not picking someone number 3 to be a sixth man. But just at the start of the year, I think that's potentially how it would play out.
Yeah, and I think the Hornets could use the season to see how well Rozier plays and use him in trade pieces as well for another asset, or just to move away and get LaMelo Ball on the team. I don't think they need to rush starting him. But I'm not sure whether he'd be happy with that. We hear a lot of rumours, don't we, about his character or his family's character in terms of the way he plays. But apparently in Australia, he was very committed. He didn't mind being involved with others. He didn't mind playing with older players. But it's just some of that shot selection issue that I think is the main worry with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. At first, back in March, all the sounds you heard were he's actually a really good kid. He's pretty he's not arrogant, anything like that. As we've got closer to the draft, we've heard his interviews have ranged from mediocre to downright terrible. That's been reported by John Hollinger, Rick Bonnell, who's the Charlotte Hornets beat reporter, has reported that. It's an extremely challenging one. I don't believe much that I hear out of Australia because I think he's now part owner of the Illawarra Hawks. They paid him an exorbitant amount of money to go over there. That whole thing was about LaMelo, and anyone will speak to in Australia, he brought more eyes to the Australian Basketball League than ever. So they're not going to sit there and rip him, because then in future, if there's any other kind of good prospect who wants to do a similar route, if the Australian media and coaches are ripping him for his effort and defensive effort, then they're just not going to go there. So the Australia stuff, I don't really buy anything of that. And I think as we've got closer to the draft, we've seen more. But there's also discussion, is he tanking some of these interviews because he wants to go to somewhere like the Knicks, down at 8? That's been something that's floated out there as well. So, it's definitely a concern. I mean, his defense for me, I think LaMelo was one on my board back in kind of March. And then I kind of did some more digging on his defense, and the frustrating thing is he's actually got the anticipation and the length and the size to be a good defender. Like, you look at him and you think, apart from, a bit of strength, which will come with age, he should be a good defender. But in the Australian Basketball League last year, he ranked in the 4th percentile, defending people taking spot-up jump shots. So that just shows his closeout ability or his effort is just not there. And he actually ranked in the 0th percentile in pick and roll defense. And that's like the most common offense used in the NBA. And he was the worst defender of any player in the Australian League of that play, which, I do think he's got potential. I really do. I think if he really committed to it, he's never had to. He's never really properly been coached before. He's never been in a situation where he's really had to earn it. And, who knows? It can go one of two ways. We've seen it before. You guys can excel when they get in the NBA and they can become, work on those areas they need to improve, or they can never do that and then they'll have the same weaknesses 5-10 years into their NBA career.
Yeah, you'd hope the NBA strength and conditioning program helps to a point, but I think you're right. I think a lot of it is knowing how to defend and wanting to defend. And whether that's just because he's in Australia and he's not here in the NBA trying to earn a living and obviously be an all-star, etc. I think maybe that played a part, but we're not going to know until we see him 6 months to a year down the line in an NBA program. I don't think his brother shows good defensive anticipation, and you'd hope there'd be some sort of trait there as well. But being 6'7", I think at the age of not even 19 yet as well, he's got time to grow. So I wonder if that will be another benefit if you draft him at this age. But yeah, we'll see. Thank you very much for coming on to make the pick. I'm going to have to move on to our 4th pick now, but you're going to come on for another draft podcast as well. So I look forward to chatting to you again, James.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Cheers, Liam.
Cool. And now I'm going to pass over to the 4th pick for Ginger Shack from NBA UK fans, who's a Bulls fan. He's going to make the 4th pick for the Bulls. And then I now have 1/5 of the NBA UK fans crew, Mr. Ginger Shack, to come and pick the Chicago Bulls. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Not too bad. Not too bad. Excited.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must be excited being a Bulls fan with the draft only 7 days away.
It's just nice not to have one that's number 7.
Yeah, true. That's every year nearly, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Okay, cool. So I've already told you off air, but we have the T-Wolves who've selected Anthony Edwards. We have Golden State who've selected James Wiseman, and we have the Charlotte Hornets who have now selected LaMelo Ball. So those 3 are off the board for you. But in terms of those 3 players, which one would have been your ideal pick? Just say if the Bulls could pick whoever they wanted.
Probably Wiseman. Probably Wiseman out of them 3. I've no interest in a guard. I've got faith in Kobe White and Zach LaVine.
You think that they'll keep hold of Zach then, and they won't target another guard in the draft at all?
I don't think they will. I mean, if they do, then obviously I'd quite like the idea of Cole Anthony. Solely just to have 2 guards, both from North Carolina.
Yeah, that will be very good for any Bulls fans. Very nostalgic.
Yes.
Yeah, we've heard rumours today as well that the Golden State Bulls could trade. What are your thoughts on this trade? So if you offered them Wendell Carter and your pick to move up to number 2 to take Wiseman, would that be a pick that interests you at all, or are you happy to stick at 4 and keep the players you've got?
It wouldn't. If we were 7, if we had, a bit further up the draft, then I'd probably accept maybe, like trading some players away and potentially getting somebody like Wiseman. But 4th pick, do you know what? Like, Wendell Carter Jr., I think, has got a fantastic future, and I'd rather invest in him than trade him away, where he'll only end up going to Golden State and just becoming a monster.
Yeah, it doesn't look good on the front office, does it, if they trade a young player who ends up goes and wins a championship or something with another team?
And we've got a new front office, so at the end of the day, hopefully they've got a little bit more knowledge and they're not as thick as Garpax, who were just basically garbage as a front office.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the Wendell Carter and Markkanen discussion, where do you sit on which one fits for you guys long term alongside White, or do you want to see both of them stay long term?
I'd like to see them both stay. I don't think they've both been able to show their true potential. Lowry didn't really fit into Jim Boylan's system as it turned out for that second season. He didn't really get the minutes, or he just didn't show out, to be honest. And then obviously Wendell had injuries, but there's flashes of great play for both of them. Larry Markkinen was and both Wendell as well. They were both players that were in, the top draft, the rookie of the year race. They didn't exactly finish at the bottom. So I think they've got a lot of promise, and hopefully with a new kind of front office and coaching team that are used to young players, then we might be able to pull out. And Billy Donovan as a coach as well. That was a nice surprise.
Yeah, I was going to say he's very well known, isn't he, for building around those young players that we saw in OKC. So I think that he might kind of help forward that path for the players you've already got, and then whoever we add in number 4 in a minute, I think could be a good addition.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, definitely. So let's move on to number 4 then. So with the number 4 pick, who are you selecting for your Chicago Bulls?
We are selecting Denny Avdija.
Oh, nice. Talk to me about Denny then. Why do you think he's a good fit with what you've got, or why do you like him as a player?
So obviously he's probably the biggest and best European prospect in the draft, without a doubt. Already played elite level basketball at Maccabi Haifa. So he's already got a taste of the professional game. He's not been playing with, young college athletes. He's been playing at a high level. He was the FIBA under-20 MVP. At the end of the day, and he also fits the position in terms of the way that I'm looking at it. Point guard, Kobe White, shooting guard, Zach LaVine, small forward, Denny, then power forward, Lowry, center, Wendell Carter Jr. To me, that sounds like a pretty tasty team. That is a team that is built around all, bar Zach, I believe, top 10 draft picks.
Yeah, true. I think you're right, actually. Yeah, Zach's going to be the only one who's not inside the top 8, I think.
Yeah, he was he was first round, but the lottery picks, but he was just outside. I believe he was 14. The Timberwolves selected him at. But no, I just think obviously he's got a smaller wingspan than most small forwards, and based on his height. But he seems like quite an athletically gifted guard. He absolutely showed out in his showed out for the Warriors when he worked out for them.
Yeah.
So
everyone said it's one of the best ones they've seen.
The Warriors going, he's all right. They know a thing or two about selecting players. So yeah, I've got a lot of hope for him.
Yeah, definitely. He's a 6'9" wing who can play guard. Likes to use the ball a lot. Do you see any issues with him and Zach playing together? Obviously, because Zach likes to dominate the ball and get a lot of touches as well. We think that they'll kind of coach around that.
I mean, I think obviously they're going to coach around it, but you've also got to look at the fact that Billy Donovan's used to coaching players that like having the ball. He coached Russell Westbrook for, for X amount of years. He's fully aware of what it's like when a player wants to have the ball in his hand and still able to get an acceptable amount of coverage to all the other players. I think you put a wing threat out on the, it's going to open it up for Zach as well to drive into the basket because people are going to be keeping an eye on him. And at the minute, shooting isn't something that people worry about when they're playing the Bulls because the best shooter on the Bulls is arguably Zach LaVine. And, he's the guy that you want storming into the paint and throwing it down. So hopefully kind of having that sort of wing threat and somebody who can maybe pick up some of the guard slack would obviously be a great turnout for the Bulls. And I think all going well could be a successful slight underhand rookie of the year contender. We've got to trust these kids from Europe. Luka told us that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he doesn't play too similarly to Luka in one way, but his passing for someone who's so big, because Luka's so big as well, it's very similar. So I think that any Bulls fans will have fun watching him do pick and roll with Carter and or Markkinen, to be fair, because they can both work quite well in that with him, I think. For
sure. I think like the carbon copy kind of comparison that people kind of did, and whether or not they chose to do it on a player, but also European playing, which was a Hergelu Turkoglu.
Yeah.
So he's kind of got shades of that. But at the same time, I think a young guard coming in, young roster, Zach LaVine kind of viewing himself as a bit of a talisman. Sign a rookie point guard. Sign a veteran point guard. Somebody that can show Kobe White how it's done. And you know what? I think you've got a pretty solid starting 5 there. As a Bulls fan, they may not be all-stars and they may not be, top class contenders, but there's a whole lot of promise there, in my opinion.
I think in the East, that sort of lineup's a playoff contender for sure, isn't it? With the strength of the 8-9 seed.
Oh, 100%. I mean, obviously, like, the Bulls did have their bad play, a very bad season. But at the same time, when they were on, they were on. Zach LaVine was pushing for an All-Star spot. On top of that, he was at the beginning of the season, he was looking like a most improved player. So, if he regains that kind of form, obviously, he didn't particularly love playing under the schemes of Jim Boylan.
Yeah,
he made that quite clear visually on the court. So comprise it all together, and I think there's quite a bit of promise and quite a bit of buzz going around Chicago at the minute. As a Bulls fan, free agency is usually where it's exciting. Now it's actually quite interesting to look at the draft, and I'd be very upset, like I said, if the Bulls drafted any of the current players I've named away to obtain a better draft pick. I'm also not too concerned about some of the other players. I'm quite happy for them to go. They're cannon fodder, as I'd refer to them.
Okay, cool. And then the last question I wanted to ask you is, obviously you're picking number 4. You don't really want to trade up, like you said. Is there any merit to trading down to get extra picks, or you think because the team's so young as it is that you don't need to add more than just the 1 star really from the draft?
I mean, obviously, if the projections are looking at it and the player that you want isn't going to go maybe like top 10, which is a shock, but if there's another team that's, so say for example, the Bulls wanted Denny, but as it turns out, the team that wants to trade doesn't want him, the team next doesn't want him, and the team next doesn't want him, and we get something like the Knicks pick, and maybe some sort of asset, some sort of young player, or maybe an early second round pick, then maybe you could. But I think obviously the hype is around the likes of LaMelo Ball, is that and Wiseman and Edwards and Cole Anthony and players like that. So I think I wouldn't be bothered if they didn't make any moves. It would be a very ballsy move by a brand new front office to start throwing things around. But even when he was in Denver, Arturo did kind of move some stuff around and he drafted well. So we shall see. But yeah, equally quite happy with the 4th pick. Don't bite your nose off to, spite your face. Just kind of accept it as a 4th pick. You've got a top 5 pick. You had a sucky season last year. Ride the wave, man.
Cool. Very good. Well, the Denny was number 4 on my board as well, so I would have picked him at 4 if I was a Bulls fan as well. So very good selection from you. Thanks again for coming on. Are there any cool plans for the NBA UK fans once we move past this COVID world?
Yeah, so obviously the plans we've got for kind of the rest of the year is to sort of continue with the team lives. We've got the NBA Mastermind obviously going on, which people appear to be enjoying. On top of that, we obviously do hopefully look at organising a watch party when it is safe and convenient and COVID is a little bit further away. Just going to try and keep kind of joining everyone up in the community and firing out some great content for you guys and having people excited and enjoying what is going on.
Yeah, I think it's really good what you guys are doing, especially during times like this when we're back in this second lockdown. I think content almost goes up for some people, and then you've got more things to enjoy whilst we're all stuck at home. So kudos to you guys for helping us all out with that.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, mate. I'm going to pass over to my interview with Ben now for number 5, for pick number 5. But yeah, cheers again, Ginger Shack, and we'll speak to you soon.
No worries. Thank you very much.
And now to make the 5th pick in this year's NBA fan draft is a voice that you'll all recognise. Making the pick for the Cavs is my co-host normally, Mr. Ben Jones. How you doing, mate?
Yes, the only Cavs fan in the UK. It's got to be done.
It's got to be done. Tried to find others. Had to put up with you again, but fair enough. We get on quite well, so why not?
Yeah, it'll fill a gap, won't it?
Definitely. So yeah, you're making the pick for the Cavs. So far we have Joe, who picked for the Timberwolves, who picked Anthony Edwards. We have Mark, who picked for Golden State Warriors, and they picked James Wiseman. We have James, who picked for the Hornets, and he picked LaMelo Ball. And then we have Mr. Ginger Shack, who picked for the Bulls, and he picked Denny Advia. So we're on to pick number 5. My first question is, do you think there's a chance the Cavs will trade this pick? And if you were the Cavs GM, would you want to trade either up or down, maybe with the Warriors, or trade back with the Celtics? Or are you quite happy just to stay at 5 and pick a player you think's good?
Quite interesting. The projected top 4 have gone top 4, isn't it? Just as a quick.
Yeah, they have gone top. They have gone almost as. But on my board, they're slightly different. But the consensus board, that they've probably gone in the exact order that people would pick them, especially with Golden State not probably wanting a guard.
I quite like that order, especially like in terms of players that fit the sort of the top 3 there. I think it works quite well.
I do think that one of those 4 teams will make a trade though on draft night or before, which is something we'll talk about in our next podcast. But I don't think the top 5 are going to pick in this order necessarily. But we have no trades so far, so we're working off that. But in terms of the Cavs, what do you think? Trade out, trade up, or stay where you are?
I would, if possible, trade back a couple of spots. I don't know how easy or how marketable that is, because I think the difference between picking 5th and picking, you could maybe drop back to 9 or 10.
Yeah, crazy, yeah.
That would be, I think that would be feasible for the Cavs.
Not much of a drop off talent wise, then you think?
No, and they can still access the players I think they want and need from that position. So maybe, I don't know, see if who would want to go up there.
Well, there's a Celtics, there's a Celtics and a Magic rumours flying around who they pick more after obviously 14-12 sort of region. But yeah, the Knicks at 8 are the only team, but would they want to trade up 3 spots and still miss on that top 3? I'm not sure if they'd want to go that high, but maybe like a Cavs or a Magic or Celtics, but then you're trading back 10 spots. So it depends if that's value for you guys or not and what else you get.
I think there's still things you can make work from that point of view. Mm-hmm. Again, in terms of the things I think the Cavs need and want, it massively depends what avenue they're going to try and go down and what players and positions they're going to try and fill up through this draft. If it was me, I'd try and go back, up to 5 places. See if there's any interest, see if anybody bites there. Maybe for, just straight pick swap or a future swap with a future pick in mind. Something like that would be absolutely fine.
Yeah, I guess. And then if not, you're happy to stay at 5 and don't really want to risk losing any of your current players to move up. That makes sense to me. I think the Cavs shouldn't take too many risks. They've already done that a lot in the last 5 years. So
yeah,
I think not doing that is probably a good idea. Let's move on then. This time we'll talk about who you've picked first, and then afterwards we'll talk about your options and go through maybe what the other options could have been. So with the 5th pick in the NBA draft, who are the Cleveland Cavaliers taking, Ben?
With the 5th pick in the NBA draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers select Patrick Williams from Florida State.
Oh, nice. This is very fitted to a lot of rumours that are going around at the moment. They don't think Patrick Williams will fall out the top 6 now. And before he was seen as a 10 to 15, but the last week or so he's gone up in the board. So what are your thoughts behind him? How does he fit into what you want for the?
So if you listen to our past episode where we talked about the top 10 teams and who we thought, I suggested who I thought each team wanted or needed, and the Cavs being near and dear to my heart, I believe they need some sort of 3D guy in the sort of forwards position because they're not going to keep Kevin Love, who is one of their main floor spreaders at the moment. And they've got some really good young, raw offensive talent that are really good slashers to the basket. Cedi Osman and the 2 young guards, but we need some floor spacing and we need someone with a bit of a defensive presence. So I've gone with Patrick Williams. He's 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan. So
yeah, good size.
Great size, yeah. He's versatile enough to play a sort of a guard all the way up to sort of a bigger forward, maybe even a centre at a push. Mm-hmm. He is quite a good spot up 3-point shooter. Takes them confidently, and
especially for that size.
Yeah, exactly, and pretty good from the free throw line. So it plugs the major gaps that I'd be looking for. I understand he's still a very raw talent and will need, some coaching and some pointing in the right direction. But in terms of what the Cavs I think, will be looking for, he is a fantastic option.
Yeah, I agree. I think he fits what you want. And now I know who you picked. That discussion of trading back makes sense because there's a lot of rumours that he's the main player for Cleveland if they can't get Denny Advia. So basically, Chicago and Cleveland apparently like Patrick Williams and Denny Advia. So whichever one got 4, you think the other team would pick up 5.
Yeah.
But I do think there was a chance if you traded back to. I think the only teams that would trade back with you in a range you could still get Williams would probably be Washington or San Antonio, the 9 and 11 spot. They might still be there just because of what the other teams need. It depends how much the Hawks at 6 would like Williams. But for me, if he's the player you want and staying at 5, I think you're almost guaranteed to get him. So I think that would be a good move for them.
It probably doesn't help. I might be using like quite an older sort of draft board. So he's still at 9th on the one that I've been looking at.
I think that's not far wrong. I think a lot of people like him in the 6 to 12 range, but it's just this draft is so much what the team wants. And if the Cavs are like, we've got everyone drafted very similar, ranked similarly, but Williams fits the mold of the player we want, they'll take him a few spots higher than the consensus just because that's who they need. That's the sort of draft we've got this year. It's not a consensus like 1 through 10. So yeah, I don't think that's an overdraft if it fits what the team wants. Who else were you considering options for that pick?
So again, making more sense of a drop back, I did look at, again, looking at our previous podcast, the guys that you suggested. So Devin Vassell, he's 11th on my draft board. So he's accessible from there. And was it Devin Bain you suggested? No.
Yeah, Desmond Bain. Yeah, he'd be a lot further back. So if you did trade with a Celtics or a team like Magic 14, 16 sort of range, I think you'd get Bain there. That would be a clever pick if you wanted to trade back and the Cavs wanted more assets maybe next year when there's better players in the draft.
Yeah. The only other thing I was toying with, which I've been reading a lot about, is the lack of faith that, we'll hold on to Drummond. So a lot of, I've read in quite a few places now that they might be thinking of getting a defensive centre just to sort of shore down that paint area, which you could be looking at a sort of, is it Okongwu?
Yeah, Okongwu would be more of a defensive centre. I've heard that similar sort of rumour. Another one was apparently the Cavs view Obi Toppin as one of the best prospects in the draft, but he's very much a non-defensive big. He's a good shot blocker, but he's more of a scorer.
Yeah.
But I just don't think there's any way that if they've got any sort of opinion to keep Nance, to keep Love, and to keep Drummond, even if it's for one season, I think Obi Toppin would be relegated to the bench. So that'd be a weird one. But rumours are that they do like Okongwu and Toppin, which surprises me because I don't think they need a big. But if you know you're going to trade 1 or 2 of those players in the next 6 months, then you make your decision based on that, I guess, don't you?
Yeah. Another thing that sort of puts me off Toppin is from what I've been reading about him, he sounds very much like Nance, a very sort of athletic kind of big that runs the floor, loves to block shots and get the high flying dunks and stuff. And what's the benefit in having 2 people playing the same position, playing the same style?
Especially when Larry Nance isn't an expensive player to have long term, I don't think.
No, definitely not. So I wouldn't. He sounds like he will be a really good player, could fit somewhere really good. But for me, the Cavs have got something in that position already that is relatively cheap. You don't need to overpay. So why bother investing in another one?
I agree. I think Williams and Vassell are 2 great options. And from everything you hear, Vassell's dropped down the draft board because of a video of him shooting where he looks like he might change his shot for the worse.
Yeah,
he's come out. Right. Yeah, he's come out and said that's not true. It's just one bad shot that looks a bit weird on a weird video. But if you trade back, I think he'll be there for you, depending on where you go. Bain will be there if you trade really far back. But Patrick Williams, from everything I hear, that could be an option that actually might happen. So our top 5 that we've got here could actually be very realistic, which would be crazy if 5 fans pick the real order of the draft. I like Williams. Yeah, I like Williams for you guys. I just think, like you said, he's a bit raw, but most of the players in this draft are raw, and the Cavs need talent. So I think that's good. If you had the choice of anyone, I've asked everyone this question, who's already gone in front of you, who would be your ideal selection? Would it still be a player like a Williams, just because you don't need a point guard, and you maybe don't need a centre in Wiseman, or do you think that if you could, you'd have gone Denny Advia, who went one pick before you?
Probably wouldn't go Denny.
Yeah, because he can't shoot outside.
Yeah, the shooting's not there. It's the small forward position, great, but doesn't plug the gap in the way you want it. Is basically having another Osman there. So
seems like Williams is the best pick then, mate.
I think so. I would be intrigued by Wiseman. Like I said, I don't think we're going to hang on to all the 100 centres we've got at the moment.
You have got a lot of centres.
I as much as interest ball brings, it would mean trading one of the other guards we've got at the moment, and I feel like we might just end up having the same issues we've got now anyway.
Yeah.
So you could tempt me with a Wiseman, but I'm quite happy with the pick.
Cool, nice, and there we go. That rounds out our top 5 fan mock draft. Thanks for joining us on that one, Mr. Co-host.
It's an absolute pleasure. I give up my valuable time for a little cameo here and
there. Thanks to everyone else who's joined in. It's all been 5 good picks, 5 good conversations. I know everyone's going to like it. In terms of our podcast, me and Ben will be back probably on a Sunday evening or Monday, where we're going to talk some trade rumours and some NBA news. And then we've got an interview with James Plowright, who you heard earlier in this podcast, to discuss general draft news and prospects rather than just Hornets prospects. So that should be a good episode to get everyone fired up for Wednesday. Are you excited for the draft, Ben?
Yeah, to be honest, I keep saying it, I'm not massive on the draft, but been getting into it a lot more this year, doing this research and talking to you about it and hearing what everybody has to say. So I'm actually quite excited because I feel like there could be a lot of movement and a lot of unexpected picks going left, right, and centre. So it could be an interesting one.
Yeah, I agree. And it does always help if you follow a team and they've got a good pick, because if they haven't got a pick or they've got a late pick, it's almost, you don't have the same enthusiasm. Whereas if anyone's picking the top 5, like all you guys in this episode, it just gives you an extra reason, I think, doesn't it, to study it up and kind of look at the prospects a bit more.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. You've got to be invested in something to have an interest, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Cool. All right, well, we'll leave it there, and we will join you next time. Thanks again, mate, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Absolute pleasure. Bye.